My name is Tabitha Harriman, and the night my son toasted me in front of everyone was the moment I stopped being his mother and started becoming his reckoning. He smiled as he raised his glass. "To my mother," he said, "the woman who used to dream big but couldn't keep up with the world she built." Laughter filled the room. Every chuckle felt like a nail sealing the coffin of my dignity. I didn't cry. I just smiled, because anger would have given him power. Under the table, I held the little brass key I'd carried all my life, the key to everything he thought was his. That was the night I promised myself one thing: he would learn exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman who built your world. The chandeliers at the Dominion glowed like captive stars, shimmering off the crystal glasses and polished cutlery. Laughter floated through the room, hollow, rehearsed, expensive. I sat at the center table, surrounded by people who once introduced me as Mrs. Harriman, the visionary architect, and now barely saw me at all. To them, I was just the quiet mother of the man they admired, the young CEO who had made it. Claire sparkled beside him, her diamond earrings swaying each time she leaned in to whisper something that made him smile. She had the kind of smile that was all surface, glossy and sharp enough to cut. Across the table, Evan rose from his seat, glass of champagne in hand, and the crowd instinctively hushed. He had learned early how to command a room. He lifted his glass toward me, eyes bright with charm and calculation. "To my mother," he said, "the woman who once drew dreams on paper, but somehow forgot how to live in the real world." The laughter came instantly, easy and cruel. Even the hesitant chuckles echoed louder than they should have. I watched the faces around me, some embarrassed, most entertained. Claire touched his arm with theatrical affection and said just loud enough, "That's just his way of being sweet." I smiled. It was the kind of smile you learn after years of swallowing words that no one wants to hear. My throat felt tight, but I stayed silent. Anger would have been a gift to them. Pity would have been worse. I reached for my purse and felt the small brass key tucked inside. It was cool against my fingertips, its edges worn smooth from time. The key to my first office, the place where my real life began, before my son turned it into his empire. It reminded me of something no one here seemed to remember. I had built things that lasted. They had only inherited them. The speech ended. Glasses clinked. A waiter refilled my wine, his polite smile the only kindness in the room. The jazz band started playing again, soft and slow, like a sigh over the chatter. Claire laughed too loudly at something across the table. Evan leaned back, proud and polished, unaware that the applause he soaked in sounded to me like the cracking of old foundations. I excused myself quietly. No one noticed. Outside, the air was cold and wet. A light rain shimmered under the streetlights, turning the pavement into a sheet of trembling gold. I stood there for a long moment, letting the drizzle cool the heat in my chest. In the restaurant's reflection, I caught my own face, older, steadier, a little worn but still standing. They thought they'd buried me under their success. They forgot who poured the concrete beneath it. I started walking toward the car, heels clicking against the soaked asphalt. The city smelled of rain and ambition, sharp, metallic. My phone buzzed in my hand, a single message glowing on the screen. "Mrs. Harriman, we need to talk about your trust account. Call me." Lucinda Hale. Lucinda Hale, I hadn't heard that name in years. She was the attorney who once helped my late husband build everything we owned. I stared at the text, the corners of my lips curling just slightly. The laughter from the restaurant still echoed faintly behind me. I slipped the phone back into my purse, fingers brushing once more against the brass key. The rain began to fall harder, but I didn't hurry. The plan hadn't begun yet, but the door had just opened. The morning sun slid through the ivy along my cottage walls in Charlottesville, coating everything in amber light. The air smelled of dust, paper, and black coffee. My quiet ritual. The radio hummed softly until a crisp voice broke through. Businessman of the Year, Evan Harriman. I turned toward the screen. There he was, my son, in a tailored gray suit, smiling like the world had always belonged to him. I built Harriman and Rowe from nothing but a dream and hard work. Not a word about me, not about his father. I switched the TV off. The house fell silent except for the faint ticking of a clock and the tap of my pencil against an unfinished sketch. From my drawer. I pulled out an old photo, James, little Evan, and me standing beneath a wooden sign that read, Harriman and Rowe Architectural Studio, 1987. On the back, James had scribbled, "She built the dream, I built the walls." I smiled faintly and opened my old hard drive. The files took a minute to load, and when they did, I felt my stomach twist. My signature, T. Harriman, was gone. Every file now read, E.H. signature. I called Claire. "Did you know about this?" "Oh, Mom, don't worry about the technical side." She laughed. "Evan just rebranded things." Her voice was sugar over steel. I didn't respond. They hadn't just replaced my name on paper, they'd erased me from memory. That night, the phone rang again. Harold Kim's steady voice filled the room. "Tabitha, the new headquarters they're bragging about. It's your design. They didn't even change the measurements." I stared at my old blueprint, its pencil lines still dark and clean, the paint hardened, cooling into something precise. "They reused my work," I whispered. "They're still building on my foundation." And for the first time in years, my smile carried the edge of steel. A soft drizzle followed me into D.C. as my old truck rolled to a stop in front of what was once mine. The building gleamed under new letters, Rowe Group Designs. The name Harriman was gone, stripped like paint. Inside, a young receptionist looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, smiling. "I built this place, dear. I never needed one." She hesitated. I walked past her, through the halls lined with Evan's framed interviews and glossy awards. The wall where my portrait once hung was bare. "Tabitha," a voice called softly. I turned to see Harold Kim holding a worn folder. "I kept copies of everything," he said. "Your name's been erased from every founder record." I opened the file. There it was, the founding document, the photographs, the contracts, all rewritten. Evan Harriman and Jonathan Rowe. I closed the folder, thanked Harold quietly, and stepped outside. The steel letters Rowe Group reflected my face, small, warped, but still there. My hand found the brass key in my coat pocket. I clenched it until it bit into my skin, driving home. The radio played his voice again, smooth and rehearsed. My mother taught me discipline, but business needs courage she never had. I turned it off. "You took my name, my work, my pride," I whispered. "Now I'll take back everything you built on it." That night, an email appeared on my screen. "Mrs. Harriman, your trust account has been accessed 3 times this month from Rowe Group servers." I leaned back, eyes narrowing, then smiled. "So they think I'm invisible," I murmured. "Let's see how invisible I can be." The afternoon sun slanted through the maple trees outside my window, spilling soft gold across the kitchen floor. I was pouring hot water over a tea bag when someone knocked on the door. 3 polite raps, too measured to belong to a neighbor. On the porch stood a man in a crisp white shirt with the logo of Bayfront Realty stitched above his pocket. He held out a large, cream-colored envelope. "Delivery for Mrs. Harriman." I thanked him, took it, and tore the seal. The first line made my breath catch. Listing agreement, property, 42 Maple Lane. Owner, Evan and Claire Harriman. I stared at it, the words blurring. 42 Maple Lane. My home. The one I bought with my first commission check in 1990, the same house where I designed half the projects that built our company. By the time I reached my car, the kettle was still whistling on the stove. I drove straight to Arlington, every mile tightening around my chest. When I rang the doorbell of their glass and stone mansion, Claire answered, glowing with effortless perfection. "Mom, you should have called. Evan's on a call with investors." I held out the envelope. "Then maybe you can explain this." She blinked, then smiled too easily. "Oh, we just listed it in case you decided to move somewhere safer. You're getting older, and you listed my house under your name." Her expression hardened just a fraction, the sweetness dissolving. "Technically, Evan's handling your finances now. It's better this way." From the stairs, his voice carried down like oil on water. "Mom, let's talk later. You're overreacting. It's just business." I looked up at him, the phone still in his hand, the arrogance so familiar it almost felt inherited. "So was your father's grave," I said quietly, "but I never tried to sell it." The words hung between us like smoke. Claire froze mid-sip, her smile stretched thin. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. That night, I drove to the city records office. The clerk was polite but tired, and after a few keystrokes, she pulled up the deed transfer file. "Signed by T. Harriman," she said. The signature stared back at me. My name curled in someone else's handwriting. I asked to see the verification record. Under the section marked "Verified by Assistant" was a name I recognized instantly. Kendra Lewis. Evan's assistant. Later. At a diner off Route 29, Harold Kim slid into the booth across from me. He looked around before leaning in. "Claire's been bragging. She says they'll free the old woman from that cottage soon." I wrote one sentence in my notebook. "They think they're freeing me. They're building their own prison." When I got home, the mailbox was stuffed again, another envelope, this one from the company's legal office. Inside was a document titled Power of Attorney, Medical and Financial. They'd already filled in my name. All it needed was my signature. I laid it flat on the table under the lamplight. My shadow fell over the line where they'd left space for me to surrender. Instead, I picked up a pencil and opened a clean page in my sketchbook. The lines came steady, deliberate. Not of a building this time, but of a plan. A week later, the mailman handed me a thick envelope addressed to my neighbor but stamped with the Row Group's corporate logo. He'd mixed up the mail again. I was about to walk it next door when curiosity, or fate, made me glance at the return label. The words on the first page sliced through me. Transfer agreement. 60% ownership of Harriman and Row Holdings to Evan Harriman due to mental incapacity of Tabitha Harriman. My hands trembled. The signature, my name, was printed perfectly. Only it wasn't mine. The forgery was almost flattering. Almost. I called the one person I trusted enough to understand the weight of what I'd found. Lucinda Hale's voice hadn't changed in 20 years, measured, calm, with the tone of someone who could make chaos sound negotiable. After I told her everything, there was a long pause. "Tabitha," she said finally, "the trust we built 25 years ago is still active. You're the sole beneficiary and trustee. Evan has no access." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So it's still mine," I whispered. "It always was," she said. "You just have to prove they forged it." She told me to gather every document, every email, every receipt, and she would file an injunction quietly before they made their next move. That afternoon, as I scanned old papers into the computer, a notification flashed, an email chain forwarded by accident from a row group address to mine. Once the guardianship is approved, the Texas investors are ready to transfer $40 million to Warser. They weren't just stealing from me. They were selling the company itself. Lucinda called again that evening, her voice tight. "We found a medical report in the preliminary filings. It claims you're showing early signs of memory loss, recommended assisted care." "Who signed it?" "Dr. Cole Whitmore," she said. "Psychiatrist. Friend of Claire's." I laughed once, dry and low. "How convenient. If they're faking a diagnosis," Lucinda said, "we can charge them with elder fraud. But you can't confront them yet. They'll destroy everything." "Then I'll let them think I believe them," I said. That night, I began rehearsing forgetfulness, small mistakes, misplaced keys, deliberate pauses. I knew how to draw illusion. I'd done it my whole life in glass and steel. When Lucinda left, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside lay an old sketchbook, the cover stained and soft. My late husband's handwriting looped across the front. "Design everything twice. Once in your mind, once in the world." I took a pen and added beneath it, "Now I'll redesign justice." The lamplight caught the curve of the brass key beside me as I drew the first lines of my new blueprint, clean, precise, and ruthless. The morning was so still that even the air seemed to be holding its breath. Papers covered my desk, contracts, blueprints, trust documents, all stacked like the bones of a buried empire. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, across from me. Lucinda Hale adjusted her glasses and traced a paragraph with her pen. "Tabitha," she said, calm and precise. "You never signed any of these transfers. They just scanned your signature and copied it. It's traceable." "Good," I replied. "Then let's trace it all the way back to their greed." For the first time in weeks, my heartbeat felt steady. Lucinda introduced me to a man who carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to seeing lies unfold on spreadsheets. Arthur Fields, former SEC investigator, now an independent consultant. He opened his laptop, the glow reflecting off his sharp eyes. "Your son's been moving funds through shell companies," he said, scrolling through a web of arrows connecting names and accounts. "Destination, Meridian Construction, Texas. That's the buyer." He zoomed in on the contract at the center. $40 million in exchange for the company that bore my name. "They're selling your name," Arthur said. I studied the document in silence, then looked up. "Then I'll buy back their conscience, with evidence." The room filled with the faint hum of the computer fan. Arthur's cursor stopped over another folder. He turned the screen toward me. "They've also hired Dr. Cole Whitmore, Claire's old college friend. He's supposed to submit a report next week claiming you have short-term memory loss." Lucinda's eyes darkened. "That'll be part of the guardianship case. They'll declare you incompetent, take legal control, and then finalize the sale." I leaned back in my chair, voice calm. "Then we'll let them think I'm fading." Arthur outlined the plan, quiet, methodical, almost surgical. We would install recording devices at both Evan's office and his house. I'd continue visiting as usual, smiling, pretending to forget things. A trap email would be sent from a dummy address, containing a fake document watermarked for tracking leaks. When he spread the printed map across my desk, lines and arrows crossing like veins of deceit, I saw what I'd built my entire life, structure. Only this time, it wasn't architecture, it was strategy. "We're not building a case," I said softly. "We're building a mirror." Arthur nodded. "The sale's scheduled for Thanksgiving dinner," he added. "Evan wants to announce it when the papers are signed and your guardianship is confirmed." I smiled for the first time that day, thin and deliberate. Perfect. Thanksgiving. The day they'll choke on their own gratitude. Lucinda glanced up from her notes. "You still own every tangible asset, the Arlington house, the cars, even the original patents. You never removed your name." "So," I said, the words tasting like steel. "They built an empire on borrowed ground." Arthur hesitated before asking the question that lingered in the air. "How far are you willing to go, Mrs. Harriman?" I didn't look up. My pencil moved over a blank sheet of paper, connecting names: Evan, Claire, Whitmore, Meridian, each one circled in red ink. As far as I need to rebuild what they tried to demolish, with blueprints, not bullets. The lamp burned low as the lines on the page took shape. The architect in me was alive again, this time, drawing the design for their downfall. Sunday afternoons had become a ritual, one Evan believed I still valued for family's sake. I arrived at their Arlington mansion right on time, pumpkin pie in one hand and a silver pen in the other. Inside that pen, smaller than a thumbtack, was a recorder. Claire opened the door with her usual performance-ready smile. "You look so tired." "Mom," she said sweetly, "maybe it's time you think about resting more." "Maybe you're right," I replied softly. "It's hard to remember everything these days." Her smile widened, the victory glint in her eyes unmistakable. I set the pie on the table and the pen beside Evan's glass. During dinner, Claire started her gentle campaign. "We found a beautiful place, Sunrise Care Estate. They have art classes, yoga, even a garden view." Evan chimed in, feigning concern. "We're just exploring options. We care about you, Mom." I let my hand shake slightly, spilling a few drops of water. He rose, grabbed a napkin, smiling with mock patience. "See? You need stability." I looked down at the shards of glass on the floor. "Stability doesn't come from walls, Evan. It comes from foundations." They laughed politely, missing the weight in my words, but the recorder didn't. Later that night, I sat in my car parked a few blocks away, listening to the playback through my headphones. Claire's voice dripped with calculation. "Once she's in the care center, we can access the accounts easily," Evan replied, casual as if discussing the weather. "The board's ready. Once she's declared unfit, the sale's automatic." Their confidence was the best evidence I could have hoped for. They had written their own confession. Arthur texted, "Evidence confirmed. Investor Texas scheduled for Thanksgiving dinner." I typed back, "Then it'll be the dinner they'll never forget." Minutes later, another message came from Lucinda. The court had quietly frozen the guardianship process under her preliminary objection. They didn't know yet. They still believed the walls were closing around me. "They think they're moving forward," I whispered to myself. "I'm already underneath their feet." That evening, I sent Evan an email, gracious and brief. "Thank you for finding such a lovely place. We'll finalize everything at Thanksgiving." His reply came within 10 minutes. "Glad you've come to terms. Mom, this will make things easier for everyone." The trap was set. Back in my workshop, I opened a small wooden box. Inside lay the first blueprint I'd ever drawn for Harriman and Rowe, edges frayed, ink fading. But my signature, T. Harriman, still etched in the corner. I traced it lightly with my thumb. "You erased my name from every wall. Evan," I murmured, "but you can't erase it from what holds those walls up." Around me, the lamplight glowed against the old papers pinned on the wall, turning the space into a shrine of quiet defiance. The house was silent except for the soft scratching of my pencil, drawing the final lines of a revenge built not with rage, but precision. The Arlington mansion shimmered with gold light and polite laughter. The table stretched endlessly, white linen, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and the scent of roasted turkey filling the air. I walked in wearing my navy dress and my mother's pearls. Every head turned. "Mom, you look wonderful tonight," Claire sang. "Let's make this night about family," Evan added smoothly, pulling out my chair. I smiled and sat. My heartbeat was steady, not calm, measured. After dinner, Evan stood, glass in hand. "Before dessert, I'd like to share some news. Mom has agreed to move to Sunrise Care Estate, and I'll be taking over her affairs. It's the right thing for everyone." Light applause, a few approving nods. Then I spoke quietly. "Before you finalize my retirement, perhaps I should contribute something." I placed a brown folder on the table. Lucinda rose, opened it, and read clearly. "The Arlington residence, the cars, and 60% of Harriman and Rowe, registered under Mrs. Tabitha Harriman via the Harriman Heritage Trust." Evan's smile faltered. Claire's voice cracked. "That's impossible." "No," Lucinda replied. "They were never yours." I pressed a button on my pen. Evan's voice filled the room. "Once she's in the care center, we can access the accounts easily." Silence. A glass shattered, red wine spreading across the white cloth like blood. I unrolled an old blueprint, my faded signature shining in the corner. "You erased my name from every wall," I said, "but not from the foundation." The door opened. Arthur entered, phone in hand. "By court order," he announced. "All Rowe Group accounts are frozen pending investigation of elder fraud." No one spoke. I stood. "You built your success on my name. Tonight, I'm taking it back." I left them sitting in the silence they'd earned. The red wine crept across the blueprint, greed bleeding into truth. Morning light poured through the wide glass windows, clean and sharp as a blade. Headlines flashed across every screen in D&C. Rowe Group's CEO under investigation for fraud and elder abuse. Evan didn't show up to the office. Claire had deleted every social media account overnight. The word collapse was on everyone's lips. I sat in the conference room that once bore my name, but had long since forgotten it. Now, it was silent except for the soft turning of pages. On the table lay a single folder labeled Harriman Design Foundation, the company reborn. Lucinda slid a document toward me. "The trust reinstates full ownership of all properties and assets to Tabitha Harriman." I signed beneath her line, the pen steady in my hand. Arthur smiled from across the table. "They tried to prove you incompetent. You outsmarted an entire board." "No, Arthur," I said quietly. "I just remembered who I am." The door opened. Evan stood there, pale and smaller than I remembered. "Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Then where did you mean for it to go?" He had no answer. I pointed to the window where workers were prying the word Rowe from the building's facade. "This is where ambition without respect leads." I handed a single brass key to Lillian Vega, the young architect beside me. "Lead with integrity. Never let them erase your name." She nodded, eyes glistening. Lucinda gave me one final document. "The trust allows you to redirect 10% of your shares." I signed it without hesitation. "To the Second Foundation, for women robbed of their worth by those they loved." As I stepped outside, sunlight glinted off the steel letters now reading Harriman Design Foundation. Behind me, the sound of metal being cut filled the air, the last traces of Rowe falling away, one letter at a time. 3 months later, the world had gone still again. My new home sat quietly by the Potomac, wrapped in the gold light of late afternoon. The river murmured against the shore like a heartbeat too soft to fade. I sat by my desk, tracing lines across a fresh sheet of paper. Another house, another beginning. At the top, I wrote the title in clean, deliberate strokes. Foundation for the Forgotten. A home for women rebuilding after everything had been taken from them. Lucinda arrived carrying an envelope. "It's from Evan," she said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single line written in his familiar hand. "I finally understand what you built. Mom." No apology, no excuses, just recognition. The one thing he'd never given me before. I turned toward the window. The sunset shimmered on the river, catching the same muted glow as the old brass key resting in the wooden box on my shelf. I opened the box, set the key on my new blueprint, and whispered, "You were the first door I ever opened, and today, you're the last one I needed." Arthur stopped by later, leaning on the doorway with a knowing smile. "You're not rebuilding the company, are you?" "No," I said, smiling back. "I'm rebuilding myself." He nodded. We stood in quiet understanding as the sun sank lower, turning everything to honeyed gold. I locked the door behind me and stepped onto the porch, the pearls at my neck catching the last light of day. "They called me a failure," I whispered, "but I was never the one who failed. I built their world, the walls they hid behind, the roofs they bragged about, and when those walls collapsed, I realized I still had the blueprint." The camera would have pulled back then, wide over the river, where light met water in silence, just the sound of the Potomac and the soft piano of a woman finally at peace.